was recently a movie that came out called Queen of the Desert. It articulated the relevancy of Gertrude Bell and her role in helping to establish a lot of the government plans and appointing King Faisal to Iraq, and her diplomatic efforts really supported British intelligence. But she was totally a loner out there doing a camel train with locals. She was not designing insurgencies, but she did have a diplomatic footprint. And so I was curious what everyone's thoughts were as it pertains to supporting T.E. Lawrence in his efforts.
That's a great question. That's a really good question. So movie makers have a really difficult job, right? Because there are probably no more than 10 key stories, key types of stories in human history. And the problem for if you make films, and I know one guy who works for DreamWorks, he was telling me that you can get a really great story. You kind of got to make it fit with the way that stories like that work, right? So the real Gertrude Bell is actually much more remarkable than the character they show in a movie, in my view. And you're right to pick up on the fact that she was more of a diplomat. She certainly wasn't doing the fighting thing. But what Gertrude Bell believed was that in Iraq, the country had never been united. It was a province, the Ottoman Empire. Like today, you can see the huge schismic differences between Shia and Sunni, between urban dwellers in places like Basra or Tikrit, compared with sort of those who live in the kind of more remote parts of the countryside or the Euphrates Valley, how different they are from the people of Fallujah and so on. And it was this, like that, if not worse, in the period of the First World War and immediately after. And there are episodes when the British Army had been fighting that region in 1917, where you get local people who are sort of kind of changing sides, depending on what they think is going to happen next. Now, Gertrude Bell was very intelligent. She realized that probably the best chance of making any kind of hope of stability in a new Iraq, a new nation of Iraq, was to embrace local leaders who were sheikhs, who would actually be able to control quite, should we say, tribal groups who were not used to sort of traditional forms of government that we associate with the Western world. And she thought that if I could work through these local leaders, then they can create stability. And to be perfectly honest with you, it doesn't work very well. What they don't show in the movie is that her plan, her hope that this would succeed, falls to pieces in 1920. And T.E. Lawrence, who she knew from before the war and she knew during the war, Lawrence was very critical of the way that she and the British authorities had tried to win over local tribal leaders and bring them into the kind of British dispensation. And the kind of consequence of all that was that the British decide that the best solution is to bring in a king, have a monarch, a single centralized form of government, try to get, so Gertrude Bell comes back to try and bring the sheikhs back into support, Faisal as a single ruler, and Lawrence plays no part in any of that. He's sitting in Oxford for a while, writing. He gets more and more demoralized and depressed about his own life. Bell is actually on the ground. She's trying to make it work. And gradually, she obviously also withdraws from political service. And everything's handed over to a man called Arnold Wilson, the guy who really gets modern Iraq kind of set up in it lasts until the 1950s, until Saddam, and before that, the Revolutionary Party took over and effectively ruined Iraq. Iraq was a successful going concern until the late 1950s, and it was effectively ruined by the Revolutionary Command Council, the Ba'ath Party, and they essentially destroyed what should have been the fabric of the modern state. So Gertrude Bell, fantastic story, much more interesting than the movie makers make it out to be. And as you say, she was on her own a lot of the time. She was, winning people over in what was effectively colonial office was considered a kind of man's world, and she was the first person to kind of break that dominance in that way. So a really remarkable figure, and I guess if you want to write a great biography, what a brilliant subject she is.